Welcome and good morning. My name is Councillor Anthony Kelly. I'm chair of today's licensing subcommittee. The review hearing on Wednesday, the 7th of September 2022. This is an application by the licensing authority of the borough to review an existing premises license situated at the business known as Sapna Express, 86 The Green, Southall, UB2 4BG. I'll be chairing today's meeting together with my colleagues, Councillor John Martin and Councillor John Ball. We're also joined by Alison Luff, who is legal advisor to the subcommittee, and Jack Roberts, who is clerk to the subcommittee and also will be minuting the meeting. In accordance with procedure, I will invite the licensing authority to present the application for review and call upon any witnesses in respect of whom permission has been given and answer any questions put to them. And then I'll invite the premises to make their representations and answer any questions. I'll invite the parties to briefly sum up their respective cases, and at the end of the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee clerk, we shall retire to consider its decision. The decision will be given at the end of the meeting and confirmed in writing within 5 working days. If we're unable to make a decision, that also will be conveyed in writing within 5 working days. So, Mr. Bob Deere, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you and the committee. As you've mentioned, this is an application to review a premises licence called Sapna Express, 86 The Green in Southall. This application was made on the 14th of July after 2 visits to the premises, and the illicit cigarettes and other goods were seized. Originally the application was submitted because of 2 visits, and they were on the Tuesday the 25th of July 2017, when officers from Trading Standards and Licensing attended the premises at 8 p.m. And as they entered the shop, there's 1 male assistant present. The officer identified themselves and produced their identification to the designated premises supervisor and premises licence holder, Mr. Barber. The purpose of the visit was explained, and whilst checking behind the counter, the officer noticed that on display 3 75cl bottles of alcohol appeared to have had additional duty-free labels adhered to the rear of those bottles. Upon closer inspection, it discovered that the new labels had been stuck over the original labels, and glue could be seen around the edges, indicating that it was duty diverted. That illicit alcohol was signed over for destruction and a first and final warning given. We returned on the 25th of January of this year as part of an operation between ourselves and police and the Southall Ward team targeting street drinking and women at risk. The designated premises licence holder was not present. Again, we identified ourselves, explained the purpose of our visit, and whilst inspecting behind the counter, noticed a large quantity of Prosecco spread around the display shelves that is only sold in Marks and Spencer's. It was priced at £12.99. When the bottles were removed from the shelves, it was discovered that the rear label had been trimmed, removing M&S identification. To the left of the counter, on the long shelf running behind the spices, a police officer discovered 59 times 20 packets of cigarettes and a quantity of Indian tobacco. We also found 2 750cl bottles of wine and seized 22 bottles of Prosecco. The shop worker was asked to contact the owner and ask him to attend the shop. He telephoned him, and when he got through, he said in Punjabi, "You need to attend the shop. We have been captured." This was translated by one of the police officers present. In total, over those 2 visits, 1,180 cigarettes, 20.25 litres of spirits and wine, and 2 kilos of Indian tobacco was seized. The unpaid duty on those amounted to £1,100 pounds. So I served a review on the premises on the 14th of July due to those visits, and it was advertised as per the regulations, and a blue poster stuck in the window, which picture is one of the exhibits at the rear of this report. And further to that, we returned on the 25th, the 25th of July. Sorry, no, it must be
August.
Sorry, the 20th of July. Thank you. I'm looking at the wrong statement. Again, with police officers from the Southall team, but this time it was operation targeting street drinkers and premises that were believed to be purchasing stolen alcohol. The premises supervisor was not present. We identified ourselves, and the gentleman behind the counter was the same person as the visit earlier. Whilst inspecting the alcohol behind the counter, I noticed a large quantity of wine spread around the display shelves that is sold in Tesco's. It was not priced, and when the bottles were removed from the shelves, it was discovered that the security labels were still attached to the bottles. On the floor behind the counter was a large cardboard box that contained another 22 bottles of various wines, some of which still had the security labels attached, and photographs appear in a report of those. In the rear store, a box was found which contained 18 packets of illicit cigarettes and a small quantity, 60 grams of Indian tobacco and some Camagra tablets. So Gohari completed the Consumer Rights Act and Police and Criminal Evidence Act notice and gave it to a shop worker. It was all counted in front of Mr. Raj Bansasi, who was the shop worker, and sealed in a bag. As we were leaving the premises, I noticed that the statutory blue notice displayed in the shop window on the 14th had been removed. When I asked where the notice was, he stated that a customer had entered the shop and removed it. He then went to the rear of the store and retrieved the same notice, and I could just see it had been folded up. So in total, over the 3 visits, 1,540 cigarettes, 20.25 litres of spirits and wine, and 2.13 kilograms of Indian tobacco seized. And the unpaid duty make that rise to £1,250. Chair, that is all the evidence. I have no witnesses, and because of the total disregard for the licence objective shown by Mr. Barber, who's been the licensee since 2015, these premises, I ask that this licence be revoked. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dear, on behalf of the Licensing Authority. Mr. Panchal, just introduce yourself and obviously introduce the gentleman that's with you, and if you'd like to make representation, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'm Mr. Panchal representing Mr. Babar Sapna Express. Mr. Babar is here with me, the license holder. That I have some representation. Before I make the representation, Chairman, can you, with your permission, can I ask one question to Mr. Dear?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Sorry, Bob, during all your visits that you made after 2017, was Mr. Babar running the shop, or was Mr. Babar not available at the shop at all?
He wasn't on the premises. He was still the premises license holder and designated premises supervisor. And on the second occasion, on the 20th of July, his son appeared on his behalf.
His son was called up by Mr. Rajwansi, who was running the shop. Am I right in saying that?
I don't know who he rang. I asked him to ring Mr. Barbar. It may be that he rang his son, but his son did turn up. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. That's the only point I'm making at this moment regarding the questioning. We're not disputing anything that Mr. Bob Dear has put forward to you today. The reason being is Mr. Babar's shop was visited, as Mr. Dear said, on 25th July 2017. Those matters were resolved. After that visit, there were several visits made by Kelly Smart from the police department at the premises, and the shop was run very well by Mr. Babar. Mr. Babar was then running the shop, and she was very pleased, if I'm not mistaken, and if Mr. Bob Deere has the information or not. And in 2020, Mr. Babar, during the COVID period, decided that it is not viable for him to go to the shop due to his age, and he was afraid of the COVID. So what he decided to do was he gave the shop to Mr. Rajwansi, who you see in the case. We're not saying that or Mr. Babar is not saying that he's right to do that, but he did that. In 2020, he gave the shop on a management contract, a verbal management contract between him and Mr. Rajwansi, that Mr. Rajwansi will take over the shop in 2020 and run the shops while the COVID is going on, and Mr. Babar will stay away from the business. His mistake at this time, which we are very sorry for it, was that he should have made Mr. Rajwansi transfer the license to him, transfer the DPS to him, which he realized that he did not do that. And he said that, well, the COVID finishes, I'll manage to do everything. So the top-up cash machine, the cards and everything at the shop were then changed to Mr. Rajwansi's name. They are still on Mr. Rajwansi's name. And all these matters that you see were carried out by Mr. Rajwansi at the shop. In reality, in legal terms, Mr. Babar is responsible for it. He's very sorry for what Mr. Rajwansi has done. He has now asked Mr. Rajwansi that he no longer wishes to carry on the management contract, which legally is going to end next month, and Mr. Babar is going to take over the shop back to himself. And that is the reason I earlier asked Mr. Bob Deere that during his visit in 2022, was Mr. Babar present? And you heard from Mr. Deere, Mr. Babar wasn't present. There was a call made to Mr. Babar, and Mr. Babar's son, Sandeep, turned up at the shop. And he was shocked to see what Mr. Rajwansi was doing. Mr. Rajwansi was warned at that time that this is not the way to run the shop. His view, Rajwansi's views were that when these Tesco's and Marks and Spencer bottles were brought in, people had bought it in, shown them the receipts, and he bought it off them. The cigarettes and that, we're not very sure how he managed to get them or what he carried on. We're not throwing the whole blame on Mr. Rajwansi at the moment. There is one reason to it, because Mr. Babar holds the license. Mr. Babar is the DPS. So he should be responsible, and he should have gone to the shop and checked it. So he's very sorry for what has happened, but he is now in a procedure to take over the shop back. He ran the shop from 2017. After that incident, he had incurred no incidents thereafter. And his mistake at this instance is that he handed over the shop to Mr. Rajwansi, which he should have known. Or if he had handed over, he should have changed. My first question to Mr. Babar was, why was the license not changed? Why was Mr. Rajwansi's not left alone? And but Mr. Babar's view was that after the COVID and after everything settles, I'll change the license. So, Chairman, he's very sorry for what has happened. He does apologize of what has happened in the shop. He willingly is agreeing that if the license is suspended for the next 3 months, which we are asking for 3 months, the matter can be resolved, the shop can be taken back, which he is in the process of taking back next month. So the shop can be taken back and reschedule and work along with the responsible authorities, which he had done. Kelly Smart can put in the reports about it. And I understand under section 11.27 and 11.28, even in the first instance, you are liable to revoke the license. But looking forward to it, we are requesting the committee today. We're asking the committee that it will not happen again. We're asking the committee that matters can be resolved and will be resolved, and the license be kept and given a second chance. That's all we can say today, Chairman.
Okay, that was very short, as you said. It might be Mr. Panchal.
Yeah.
Just quickly, you've you've said a 3-month suspension. Are you suggesting any other conditions? I know we've got the list here, just to confirm everything listed in the annexes in the papers. You can confirm that you're happy with you're satisfied with all of that.
Chairman, we were then in 2015 involved with this license application, and as you can see, the conditions of the license, there are about
27, so to speak.
27
Yeah.
conditions.
So just to confirm that you don't want to make any amendments to that.
The only amendment we would make at this stage, if there isn't in the condition, to say all goods will be sold, bought from AWRS registered, and Mr. Rajwansi shall not be allowed to be on the premises. We can definitely put that condition, okay. Add that condition.
Okay.
We have not sold any alcohol above 5.5. You can see that condition number 28. The high volume has never been sold in the shop, which Mr. Bob Deere can confirm. He hasn't found it.
Well, he can confirm that he hasn't found any.
He hasn't found any because the shop doesn't do that.
He can confirm that he hasn't found any. Yeah, we can ask him that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So just before I go to fellow councillors, just bearing in mind that Mr. Rajwani is not here, so and Mr. Baba has said that he hasn't been managing the premises. I don't think we're going to have much success in asking why certain things were on the premises and what was the rationale and how it happened. It's been accepted by the DPS that it was someone else doing it, someone else managing the place at the time. So having said that, I'd like to defer to Councillor Ball. Do you have any questions to Mr. Panchal and his clients?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I take your point that it's hard to ask directly if Mr. Baba wasn't there, but I mean, I suppose I could ask in terms of, does it seem credible to Mr. Panchal and Mr. Baba that there would be bottles that were from M&S and from Tesco, and that they'd been bought from someone else who brought them in with a receipt? Does that sound, do they believe the man who was running the shop, or do they think that's not credible?
Yeah. So what discussions has your client had with Mr. Rajaswani about the details of what's gone on and why stuff was there? Let me phrase it like that.
To make it very simple and straightforward, is when Rajwansi was asked, why was this bottle, why did you buy from Tesco's and that? And he insisted that people who brought it to him brought the receipt with him. So he personally did not go to Marks and Spencer or Tesco's to get it. People brought it to him, and sometimes people get it cheaper and they buy it and bring it there. And he insists, when Mr. Baba asked him that why was the stock there, that he was produced with the receipts. So the profits, let me put it very straight, the profits from the shop, the takings of the shop, all went to Mr. Rajwansi, did not go to Mr. Babar. So the control of the stock was also by Mr. Babar. So a lot of questions Mr. Babar asked Mr. Rajwansi at this time, that why has this happened? And you put me into all sort of trouble. So that is the explanation we can give today here. We can raise our hands up and say, yes, we have made the biggest mistake by not changing the license to Mr. Rajwansi. Yes, we can raise our hands up and say, we are very sorry for what has happened, but we are taking the shop back and we are moving forward from here. And we are saying to Mr. Rajwansi, well, you've really taken us for a big ride.
That's fine. Thank you. John, I'll go to Councillor Martin briefly. I can come back to Councillor Ball. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you.
Questions, Mr. You'll have an opportunity to speak more broadly, but have you got questions to Mr. Panchal?
Yeah, I just want to be absolutely clear. So when you sublet the shop, for want of better words, you paid no attention whatsoever to what was going on in your shop at that time. So this alcohol, this cigarettes, tobacco, you paid no visits, you took no real interest in what Mr. Rajasani was up to. Is that, I just want clear understanding there.
Let's put it like that. Yes, I could agree with what you're saying, that Mr. Babar did not go down to the shop to have a look. He was quite sure and quite confident that Mr. Rajwansi will run the shop according to the conditions laid out and according to the licensing laws, because he also did come on a short course for licensing. So Mr. Babar had a full confidence that that will happen. And hence between 2020, he did not visit a lot at the shop. We agree to that. There's no dispute on that. We're not going to argue with that.
My second question then is, was there a relationship between the two gentlemen prior to the shop being let or being sublet?
Whose relation? Is it Mr. Rajwansi and Mr. Babar?
Yeah, between Mr. Rajani and Mr. Babar.
They just know each other like friends. They're not related in any way. There is no blood relation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Or through marriage?
No.
Yeah. Just fair to establish that. Okay. So my question, Mr. Panchal, if I wasn't sat here in my home and I was shopping in Sapna Express now, who would be there?
Well, Mr. Babar is now taking over the shop.
No, I'm asking now, today. Mr. Babar's in front of me, you're in front of me, I'm here. Who's in the shop?
Who's in the shop? Yeah, Mr. Aman is at the shop now. No, Mr. Rajwansi isn't there.
Okay, so Mr. Rajaswani is not there. Okay,
no.
So just because it's important, if we are minded to do as you ask, to understand who works in the shop and when. So Mr. Rajaswani, he's how old is Mr. Rajaswani?
How old is Rajwansi?
Roughly.
Rajwansi, how old is Rajwansi? Mr. Rajwansi is 35.
Okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, I understand. And so the person who's now working in the shop.
How old is he? 22.
Okay, fine. And how long has, who's been working in the shop since this was issued in July?
I think because the contract was running on.
Well, you said there is no contract. It was verbal.
It's a verbal contract, but because all the machines, all the taking machines like cash machines, top-up machines, SIM card were all registered in Mr. Rajwansi's name.
And
so they are now being transferred. Mr. Babar is in the process of getting all those transferred back to his name.
Okay, fine. So Mr. Rajaswani, as of up till today and now, is still the person who's in receipt of the revenue that comes into that establishment.
Yeah, because the revenue, any card revenue would come up if it was taken on a card machine or that, which they've stopped doing it now. Yes. They've stopped doing it at the moment. They're saying they're not receiving any card payments anymore because it would go into Mr. Rajwansi's name.
Okay. And the cash?
The cash would be taken by Mr. Babar now.
No, as of today, today.
As of today, who takes the cash? Mr. Babar takes the cash now.
And when did Mr. Rajaswani stop taking the revenue?
Yeah. The revenue is now taken.
when did Mr. Rajaswani stop taking the revenue?
When did Mr. Rajwansi stop?
End of this. I kick out today.
Today.
Today. Must never see us.
The end of August, it was up to Mr. Rajwansi. Now they have taken over. Everything is now going to Mr. Babur.
Okay, so from the moment this, so Mr. Dear has gone into the property.
In July, it was Mr. Rajwansi.
Okay, and that's after the this had been issued, the review.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, fine.
Sorry, Chairman,
So the review was issued,
yes.
and there was a subsequent visit by Mr. Dear, and Mr. Rajaswani was still in that property.
Yeah, still in the property.
Okay, fine. I don't have any further questions via that. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, let me just bring up my checklist. Councillors, Councillor Ball, did you have any further questions?
Further question. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Martin.
No, absolutely fine, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Obviously, you can. So, yeah, Mr. Dear, obviously, in a sense, it's Mr. Babar's issue that we're here in front of. So, if you'd like to, make any representations and include any summing up that you can, please do so.
Sorry, Chair. Is it possible just to ask about 4 questions of the?
Yes, of course. Of course. Yeah. Okay. Let's do that first, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Because unfortunately, 11 o'clock at Percival House, the fire alarm went off, and I missed some.
Okay.
The answer to. But earlier, Mr. Panchal said that all the bills were now in Mr. Rajwansi's name. Does that include the business rates and all the other?
No, the business rates still remained in the name of Mr. Babur. Like I said, even the business rates and even the license wasn't changed. That's so surprising, because when this matter came to me, I asked Mr. Babur why was the license not changed to Mr. Rajwansi, and why we are now in this seat when everything should have been changed. And Mr. Rajwansi.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
Why, when the first time in January, did Mr. Ramwaji phone the premises license holder and say, we've been captured?
When he said we've been captured, means he was being captured. So he told Mr. Babur's ringing that we've been captured means he was being captured. That's why what he meant indirectly. I don't know how the translation was carried out, but what he meant was that he's been captured, what he was doing. And he asked
it was by a long-serving policeman in the area who said, he just said, we. And I think there was a big difference between I've been captured and we've been captured in any language.
Yeah, but we're trying to absolutely make it very clear. When he said we've been captured or I've been captured, what he meant was he's been captured or police has been come in. Can you come in? And you clearly say in your report also that when Mr. Sandeep turned up, Mr. Baba's son, he also said to you very clearly that he didn't know what he was doing. And here, Mr. Sandeep is here also with me. He clearly said to you and the police that, well, I don't know what he's doing. And, I've got no idea what he's doing. So it clearly shows that Mr. Baba's son were not aware what Mr. Rajwansi was doing.
Thank you. On the 22nd of January, you want the committee to believe that there's been this verbal management contract in agreement since COVID times, or just before COVID. But why didn't Mr. Barber do something in January when all those goods were found, his good name, his good license was in jeopardy?
Mr. Barber did question him quite a lot in January when he was found out, and they did go through all the matters as far as I'm concerned. But Mr. Baba's here to answer that if you want to.
Yeah, completely lovely.
Well, okay, sorry, Bob, let's be clear. What is it you would like to ask Mr. Baba specifically?
Well, what I'd ask, Chair, is he's come here today. We're in September. He got served a review on the 14th of July. On the 20th, we found stuff. The 22nd of January this year, we found stuff. I'm just wondering why it's taken him so long. And it's a common theme I see every hearing at a review that it's not his fault. He wasn't there.
Okay, let's Ms. Panchow, obviously.
I'll ask Mr. Babar can answer that.
Actually, sir, in the January, this happened in the January.
You're going to have to come a bit closer to the mic, sir. Yeah.
Sorry, sir.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yes, in the January, this happened. Actually, this guy never said me anything. I know about anything for him. So
I understand.
now is this question coming in the paper, and now you ask me about this happening. So I understand now what's happening. Before I don't know what's happening in the January. These people never say me everything.
Fine. If you could just follow up there, Mr. Deere, because I don't quite think that's what you're asking.
No, Chair, and also on that point, Mr. Barber's saying that he didn't know in January. Well, he was told we've been captured in January by his shop worker. And also the visit on the 20th of July, Mr. Barber, you said you didn't know anything. Paperwork was given to your son of the second or the third seizure.
Is your son with you?
Yes, he's here with us.
Yes, that's okay. It's just that we for the interest of
Was the paper
transparency.
given to you?
No.
He says the paper wasn't given to him, Bob.
He came into the shop and I actually asked, unknowing who he was, to leave the shop because we was in the middle of a search. And once Officer Gohary did the paperwork, he gave the copy to his son.
Right. So we've got a bit of dispute here. Given somebody who says they didn't receive it and they're in the room, could they show their face, please? Hello, Mr. Baba Jr. Forgive me. Mr. Deere, and the gentleman in front of you, do you recognise him? Have you issued anything to him?
Officer Gohary gave him paperwork when he turned up that night, sir.
That man that's in front of you?
Yes, indeed.
And you were with Mr. Gore? You were with Mr. Gorey?
Oh, indeed, yes.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Thank
Sorry,
you,
Chair.
sir. Yeah.
Chair. Could I interject and ask that the son confirms his name, since he's made a contribution to the hearing?
Yeah, Sandeep Singh Babar.
Thank you, sir. Sandeep Singh Babar.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Sorry, Chair. I've just got one final question. In his representation to you, Mr. Pancho, on his behalf, said that before he gave him this contract, this verbal agreement, he'd been on a course, Mr. Rajwansi. Obviously, I don't know if any proof has been brought today of that course, because there were no courses during COVID.
Sorry.
Okay.
Can I just clear that, Chairman? During COVID period, during COVID period, we were running licensing courses on Zoom, like the committees were running the committees on Zoom that we do today. We were running all our licensing courses on Zoom, and we were calling people individually to come and give their exams. I cannot confirm much about Rajwansi when he did the course or when, but I can find it out from my details.
Yeah,
sorry. No, it's right, Chair. Just one final bit. Mr. Barber has obviously taken over 2 years to, to transfer this license, or apply to transfer this license, or even think about it. I'm just wondering what he was doing during COVID, if it wasn't on his mind. That is concern of his shop.
Mr. What were you doing during COVID? 20 minutes दुकान दे दी उसके बाद क्या कर रहे थे आप?
मैं तो बस बीमार कोई भी हो गया था बीमार
He himself caught up with COVID. Sorry.
Okay.
He himself had caught up with COVID in 2020, in the 20th, and he was sick, so he did not do anything much.
So
I've just got the confirmation now. I did not ask him. There's one clarification that I made earlier, and I will make it again. That why was the license not transferred? Yes, that is the question that I've asked Mr. Babar quite a long time, and he thought that he would transfer it once he gets well or whatever. I can understand now, but that is the biggest question that I asked Mr. Babar. Why was the license not transferred? We would not be sitting in front of this committee. It would be Rajwansi who would have been sitting in front of the committee. And that is a major issue that we are now occurring for Mr. Babar.
Okay.
Mr.
No further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you would, I've got no indications from the councillors. So Bob, if you'd like to, make representations and sum up all in one go, that'd be useful. And Mr. Panchal can respond to the matters you may bring up in his representations and summing up. And obviously, then there's right to reply, but obviously the right to reply goes to Mr. Panchal. So, Bob, Mr. Deer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've heard today that Mr. Barber has been a licence holder since 2015, and in 2020 2020 he apparently gave this oral agreement to Mr. Rajwansi and just basically accepted the rent of him. Had no concern for the shop. When we went to the shop on the 22nd of January, Mr. Barber was well aware of what we seized, took no action. As you mentioned earlier, Chair, it's only a verbal agreement. There's nothing on paper. Why didn't he take action then? He is a total disregard for the licence objectives. He's a bad example, a very bad example of a licence holder. That area we've seen here before on these committees is not a very nice area due to the alcohol that is served down there. We've had premises brought before the committee before because of the same thing down there. And just one further thing, Chair, Mr. Barber Jr. says that he's never received any paperwork from the 20th. In fact, I've got a copy of one he's actually signed. In fact, sorry, I've got one sent by Mr. Barber Senior signed, which never go in the papers because it's not a public document, or we don't want to see it in the public document. But he's actually signed it once on the 25th of the January and again on the 20th.
Yes.
So he was given a copy. He knew fully well that he was selling stolen property in that.
Sorry, one moment, please, just to pause. Mr. Panchal, obviously you're confirming your client, which is fine, but it's interfering with Mr. Deer's representation.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah. So either mute your mic or yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. Keep going, Mr. Deer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're talking here about stolen, and it was stolen because otherwise, why would you cut the labels off? The M&S indicators on it. If you had a receipt, if you was given a receipt by someone, why cut the label off? And then put it on display. Did the same again. This premises. I don't even know where the nearest Marks and Spencer's is. It's probably across from our office here. But Tesco's is just up the road, 200 yards, and that's where all the other property was coming from. And again, no receipts have been produced. How did Mr. Barber satisfy his accountant for the money that was going through that account with the invoices and such? So, Chair, I've heard it all before. I ask that you revoke this licence because we don't really want licensees like this in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deer. Mr. Panchal, I hope this to be the last representation. So please please address any questions that you think Mr. Deer merit answering.
Chairman, I'm quite satisfied with what Mr. Bob Deer is saying. A few things that I'd like to sum up.
Thank you.
And that will clear us from these representations that Mr. Babar at the moment is very sorry for what he's done. He has made a mistake. We're not arguing with that. We're not saying that he hasn't made a mistake. The first biggest mistake he's made is he did not transfer the license to Mr. Rajwansi. That's the first mistake he's made. And the second mistake he's made is he did not went on to see what Mr. Babar was doing in the shop when Mr. Rajwansi was doing in the shop. When asked to Mr. Rajwansi where the goods came in for, and I can explain to you that lots of time retailers tend to buy their stuff from Tesco's or Asda, where offers are better than cash and carries, and those receipts are kept. He was asked, and he said, yes, people who brought in, some of the people gave him the receipts, and that's where it ended. When removing the labels, anybody selling the other products in the shop and wants to remove a label, he can do that, as long as he's not messing up with the labels that are showing the ingredients and what the product is. So that labels were not removed. So we are not saying that we've done very well. We're not saying that Mr. Babar is an excellent trader. Yes, he has made a mistake, but everybody learns from their own mistakes. He's learned a mistake from what has happened now. All he's asking this committee, he's taken over the shop back. He wants to go forward with the shop. If the license was suspended, we agree on the 11.27 and 11.28, even in the first instance. As Mr. Babar is the license holder and the DPS, the license should be revoked. We're not arguing with that. But we're asking this committee to be lenient and say to us, okay, we can go back. We can revamp the whole shop again, get it back to normal, learn our lesson of what the mistake incurred, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Now you would say, what confidence would you have in having that decision to suspend the license and go back? The confidence is there. In 2017, when Mr. Babar was asked about the stuff that was caught, which Mr. Deer is mentioning to you, there were several visits made by Kelly Smart, who's the police licensing officer. I know Kelly personally. And Mr. Babar said there were several visits made by Kelly Smart, and there was no stuff found in the shop till Mr. Babar gave it back to Rajwansi. And those matters can be looked into if you want to. And the shop was running perfectly. In came COVID. Here we go. That's the mistake, Mr. Babar. He raises his hands up. He's not arguing, and he's not telling you that he has not made a mistake. He has made a mistake. I understand when I was given when the blue notices went up, that's the first time Mr. Babar came to me and said, there's a blue notice, what happens next? And that is where I explained. And when I go to more details, I realized that there is not much I could help Mr. Babar at this time, because a huge mistake has been made. So we explained to him how future businesses should be run. So we are requesting this committee, Chairman, that if the license is suspended, matters will be resolved, a matter will be looked in forward, and we'll make sure that we do not have to come back to this committee. Thank you very much, Chair.
You're on mute, Chair.
Sorry?
Councillor Ball or Councillor Martin, did you have any further question? Anything?
No,
Yeah.
Chair.
Before we retire, Alison, our legal advisor, do you think that's covered everything now?
I think so, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's 11:21. 11:21. We will retire now. I would anticipate that we will be back to give a decision at sort of 12 o'clock prompt, noon. So if you wish to be here for the, please log in at 5:02 so that you can be here promptly at 12 o'clock. And obviously the committee reserved the right to take longer should it need to. So see you, Mr. Panchal and Mr. Deer, should you be minded to come. please log in at 5 to 12. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I've got a small request. I'm running a course today because my trainer hasn't arrived. I won't be able to come back at 12, but I would request Alison or Jack Roberts to email the decision to me. I'll appreciate that.
Mr. Panchal, obviously you can't make it. It's unfortunate, but it will be on the live YouTube stream. So you can ask, if you can't find it, you can ask Mr. Roberts for it.
I'm happy to email you, Mr. Panchal.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me today.
But obviously, the decision is on YouTube.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I do want to just make it clear that
that's very kind. Thank you for that. It means we won't be wondering